The important thing that we have to look at is that what happened to this Sheol, or in Greek, Hades, after the resurrection of Christ. After the resurrection of Christ. Point number C, intermediate state, since the resurrection of Christ. When Christ died, he went to Sheol and fundamentally altered its structure. So if you just say, all right, maybe I want to draw here. So let me see if I can draw something here. Let's take it is Sheol. And you wanted to divide that. All right. All right. So this is a place for the righteous. All right. And the lower part of the Sheol is the place for the wicked. And of course, maybe there is some place, something called, maybe there can be something known as, abyss, bottomless pit, Tartarus, or whatever the, whatever maybe the word we wanted to use. One more place for some incarcerated angels. Yes. So at least there, at least there should be two places, right? That is, one is for the righteous, one is for the wicked. Two places. That's on the compartment of the Sheol. Now what we are addressing here, what we are talking here, is what happened to this place, right? The place where the righteous lived. All right. So the biblical support the biblical support for Christ's visit to Sheol. One second, I have somehow okay. In Acts chapter 2, 77 to 31, right? It is a verse that refers to Jesus Christ that is quoted from the Old Testament. Let's look at Acts 2:27. Acts 2:27. Can anyone read Acts 2:27?
Because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, you will not let your Holy One see decay.
Okay. Can you read down?
You have made known to me the paths of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence. Fellow Israelites, I can tell you confidently that the patriarch David died and was buried, and his tomb is here to this day. But he was a prophet, and he knew that God had promised him on an oath that he would place one of his descendants on his throne. Seeing what has to come, he spoke of resurrection of the Messiah, that he will not abandon to the realm of the dead, nor did his body see decay.
Okay. I know that NIV translate that the word as realm of the dead, right? But if you look at NASB, it says he was neither abandoned to Hades. The word is used there, Hades. So somehow, yes, Jesus was. See, this is the idea. Yes, all the people in the Old Testament, they died and went to Sheol or Hades, right? All the people went to Hades. Jesus also will go to Hades because he's part of the Old Testament, right? But now here is a prophecy that says, no, Jesus' soul will not be abandoned in the Sheol. Rather, he's going to be resurrected. It is prophesied in the book of Psalm. So yes. So how do we know that Jesus went to Sheol? First of all, it clearly says that Jesus' soul will not be abandoned to Hades. Second verse is from Luke chapter 23. Jesus promised the thief that they would be together in paradise on that very day. Remember? What do you remember? Jesus Christ on the cross. Both sides, there are two thieves. And, there's one person who repented, believed in Christ. And what did Jesus say? Jesus said, you will be with me today in where? In paradise. Which says that Jesus is going to be in paradise. Thief also is going to be in paradise with Christ. Because he's a believing thief. He believed and he went. So both of them are there in paradise. And Romans chapter 10, verse 7. Romans chapter 10. Let's look at this verse. Romans chapter 10, verse 7. Yes, verse 6 and 7. 6 and 7. But the righteous based on faith speaks as follows. Do not say in your heart, who will go up into heaven? That is to bring Christ down. Assuming Christ is in heaven, it is something that Paul is addressing a big issue here. Well, if you read chapter 10 deeply, like spending time, you will understand what he's trying to talk. And then verse 7, who will descend into the abyss, right? Abyss. That is to bring Christ up from the dead. In NIV, who will descend into the deep, right? So, yes, that means it is the truth that is generally believed in the Bible that they all went to a place after they die. And looking at the various verses of the Bible, yes, clearly suggests that it is the Sheol that they went, right? Now coming to Ephesians chapter 4, let's turn to Ephesians. Can one of you please read Ephesians chapter 4, verse 8? Now this is, the verse is here given before it talks about the gift, right? Jesus gives gifts to the church. You have in verse, for example, what are those gifts? Verse 11 of chapter 4, he gave some as apostles, some as prophets, some as evangelists, some as pastors and teachers. So these are particularly, those ability to prepare the body for service, for the ministry. So now let's go to, before giving these gifts to the church, let's look at Ephesians 4, verse 8. Anyone?
This is why it says, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people.
Next verse also.
What does he ascended mean, except that he also descended to the lower earthly regions?
Yes, lower parts of the earth. I know that sometimes NIV's translation are very bizarre, right? So maybe rather we get a good idea when you look at, because that's what they wanted to be fluid, and you can come up with any conclusion. We don't care about, I think NSB does better job here as I descended into the lower parts of the earth. Who descended? He descended. Who is the he? Jesus. Jesus descended. Maybe an alternative view, if you wanted to see, go ahead and search for Wayne Grudem, who don't believe that Christ descended, right? Now, so, maybe there are a couple of articles that given there, but so yes, Bible says I think we can almost clearly say and argue that yes, and especially look at the place, even lower parts of the earth, these verses suggest that Christ, after he died, went into Sheol, went into paradise, right? Paradise. Now, the question is, automatically we have a question. What was the purpose of Christ's visit? Why don't he go directly to heaven? Right? Resurrected, go to heaven directly without visiting, right? So, first of all, as maybe some people think, he did not go, okay, he did not go, he did not go to hell or to Hades to complete his suffering in payment for sin. Some people think that, oh, where did Jesus go? Jesus went to hell. Remember, he bore our hell. So he suffered in hell. That is what some people think. Because for our sin, Jesus has to go to hell. So that is what these verses talk about. I don't think that's right. I don't think that is right. Christ doesn't have to go to hell for any reason. Because Christ cried at the, once again, come. Yes. Wait, yes. Christ cry. Wait, I'm trying to take a pen here, and it all comes in this. Okay. Yeah, maybe that should. Yes. Christ cried. When Jesus cried on the cross, where he said, at the end, he said, it is finished. What is the word, it is finished? In Greek, the word is tetelestai, right? That word tetelestai, it is finished, signaled not only the end of his life, but the completion of his atoning suffering death. That he has done the payment in full. Paid in full. That is what simply it means. Tetelestai. Christ's presence in paradise suggests that his purpose was not to suffer. He did not go to Hades to suffer. Suffering is over. He's dead. The payment is done for the penalty for sin. While Sheol and Hades is a place of torment for the unregenerate, it is not a place of final judgment and payments of sin's debt at all. This is not a place of payment. Yes, it's a place of torment for the unbelievers. It's not a place of torment for believers. It is finished. Jesus paid. So Jesus did not suffer. Some people think that way. The next one is this. He instead, what did he do? He instead brought deliverance to Old Testament saints, and then in paradise, then took them to be with God. So remember, I did draw a picture here, and in the picture, all right, I said there are two compartments, right? So this is the compartment for the righteous people. So all the righteous who went, they went to this area, and there is a chasm in between, and here is the suffering place, right? The wicked. So Christ went down into Sheol, and what he did, what did he do? He removed all the saints from here and took them into heaven. Right? So he emptied the paradise, or he emptied the righteous place in Sheol, right? Not only that, in First Peter chapter 4, we read, what did he do? The gospel has for this purpose been preached even to those who are dead, that though they are judged in the flesh as men, they may live in the spirit according to the will of God. So Peter says, gospel has been preached. What is that? What really happened there? What kind of gospel it is? Ephesians 4:8 we already read. He ascended on high, led the captive, a host of captives, right? So he led the people who are in paradise, kind of captivity, and they were there because they were waiting for the final redemption to happen. Their final redemption was not over. They were that final removal is not all happened. They were waiting. So you have these two verses. So what should we read here? When Christ died, he made a final expiation for sin, rendering it possible for the righteous dead who died. Remember, we talked to this verse, without having received the promise. The promise. Come back to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 39. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 39. Anyone?
And all these, though commanded through their faith, did not receive what was promised.
Yes. All these. So who are these? These are all the Old Testament saints, the heroes of faith in the Old Testament. It says they all received approval through their faith, but did not receive what was really promised, the seed of Abraham. That is the Messiah. So they were waiting for the final expiation to take place, final atonement to take place. And to become the spirit of the righteous man made perfect. What were the spirit of righteous? Now, you may might have read this verse several times. Let's go to Hebrews 12. Hebrews 12. Verse 23.
And to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect.
Yes, most of the scholars believe that the spirit of the righteous made perfect. Made perfect. Who are they? They are the Old Testament saints. Old Testament saints. So, in the summary words of Hebrews 9:15, since a death has taken place for the redemption of the transgressions that were committed under the first covenant, right? So those who have been called have been freed to receive the promise of eternal inheritance. Yes. So what do we understand? Death has taken place for the redemption of the transgression. So that means, yes, see, the sins of the Old Testament, even though there were temporal arrangements for provision of sin, there were sacrifices, but there was no final expiation that ever took place. That's the reason they had to sacrifice daily. There were daily sacrifices. There were yearly sacrifices. There were feasts, various offerings. Every year they had to repeat because there was no final sacrifice, right? But now those people committed sin under the first covenant, talking about the Old Testament. The Jesus' death for the redemption is applied to them, right? So they have been, this verses, now they're being freed. They enjoyed the complete freedom from the sin only after the death of Jesus Christ. Death of Jesus Christ. Now, maybe I did not give that verse here. I wanted to show you one more verse that I often talk about from Romans 3. Romans 3, turn your Bibles to Romans 3. Paul talks about people who are under the law. Yes, and he says that, verse 23, he says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Right? All right. Now look at chapter 3, verse 25.
Whom God put forward as a propitiation by his blood to be received by faith. This was to show God's righteousness, because in his divine forbearance he had passed over former sins.
All right. Okay, which translation are you reading from?
ESV.
ESV, yes. If you look at NIV will say, in his forbearance, he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He left the sin unpunished that was committed beforehand. And NIV says, merciful restraint, he let the sins previously committed go unpunished. How do you take that verse? The sin that was under the law, sin that were committed under the law, were left unpunished. It has not been really punished by God. Of course, animals were sacrificed. There was no real punishment for the sin. But the real punishment for the sin happened when? Verse 25 clearly says, when propitiation in his blood through faith. The blood of Jesus talks about his death, actually, right? The blood represents the death of Jesus Christ. So it simply says, Old Testament believers did not receive final propitiation. They had to wait. Kind of, maybe Ephesians you see the word captives. But in Hebrews, you read that they are freed now for the eternal inheritance. They have become free completely. In Romans, you see actually why they were not free before. Complete freedom was not there from the sin, because the punishment for sin was not actually taken place. That is the reason in Hebrews 9, the author says, the blood of bulls and goats will not take away sins. Yeah. Right? So the ultimate sacrifice, the real one, had to come, Jesus Christ. So it is possible through by means of certain that a tantalizing event, right? Without commentary after the death of Christ may reflect this transition of the Old Testament from paradise to heaven. All right? Old Testament saints were transferred from paradise to heaven. We don't know. Now tell me, okay, read with me this verse. Read with me this verse and tell me what that actually is, right? Matthew 27, verse 50 to 53. Anyone of you, please read. Matthew 27. Matthew 27, verse 50 to 53.
And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened,
All
and
right,
many
now listen carefully. Verse 52, what do you read? Yes, go ahead.
the tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised.
Yes,
And
okay, 1 second. The bodies of the saints who are dead were raised, right?
and, com-
53.
and coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many.
They appeared to many people. And then we don't have any stories of them at all. Some people were raised that the moment Jesus died, so it doesn't take much time for him to go to, I mean, if he died, he went to the Sheol. Same moment, right? It doesn't, and the promise is made, that is made to the Old Testament saints. So who were dead? They were saved, that's what Matthew says. They're resurrected. Body, not all of them, so maybe it's a token. I would say it's a token to show that the transfer of the souls out of paradise into heaven. It's maybe that event is maybe a little bit has been shown here in this verse, because there's no other explanation for this verse. What really happened now? What happened to these people who were raised to life? What happened to these people? Well, they were raised. They went. So it most probably, right? These people came out. These people came out, and maybe they were on their way, movement of these souls to heaven. So, yes, Jesus altered the Sheol. Portion of people, that is, portion means the Old Testament saints were transitioned to heaven. Not only that, Jesus did something more. Jesus confirmed the doom of sinners. Confirmed the doom of sinners. Yes, 1 Peter chapter 3:19, he went and made a proclamation, right? Not really, he preached to the spirits in prison who were once disobedient, right? Now, don't think that Jesus was giving them a second chance for regeneration, but a message of doom. So those spirits in prison, not only he transitioned the Old Testament saints, but he declared to the spirits in prison that your doom is confirmed, because the Son of Man has made the final payment for sin. And those of you who did not believe, this seed, the Messiah, is confirmed to go to hell, right? Go to hell. So they are there. Old Testament unregenerate are there. And maybe some fallen angels are there. They received the confirmation of their judgment. So friends, that is what we read, or we have to understand the reason why Christ went. So he went to take people from Sheol to heaven. Second, he also wants to declare the judgment to those unbelieving people who are in hell, and even the angels as well. That is what he was doing. Now, let's look at the result of Christ's visit to Sheol. Now, paradise is now in the third heaven with God. So now where is the paradise? Paradise is in heaven, especially third heaven. Remember, Paul was taken up to where? The third heaven. Now you might ask, why third? Again, if you have not listened to my talk before, yes, Bible talks about three heavens. The word heaven is explained in three ways. Number one, our atmosphere, right? Where we have the oxygen, where we move around. That is, Bible describes as a heaven. Second heaven is where we have all the stars, galaxies. Second heaven. And beyond the created world is the third heaven, right? Third heaven. That place now, so the paradise that was there, paradise that was there in this Sheol is removed, taken into heaven. Number two, no saint will ever again enter Sheol. Church saints, no empty saint will ever go to Sheol, because the gates of Hades will not overcome. That means overcome the church of saints. Now, we are not going to Hades anymore or Sheol anymore, right? So that's one. Next, upon death, believers go immediately to be with God. If I die today, if you die today, you will go immediately with God. You will not wander. Your spirit will not wander, right? For example, how do you know? At least three verses. Number one, Stephen's case, right? Stephen was ready to be martyred, right? They are ready to kill him with the stones. And they're stoning him. Stephen looked up to heaven and asked Jesus to receive his spirit. That's what he prayed. Maybe like Jesus prayed. Stephen wants to pray, receive my spirit. He looked up to heaven. And you know what? What did he saw? Right? What did he see? Will be asked. What did Stephen see as he was dying? Anyone? Anyone remember that story? What did Stephen see?
He saw Christ standing and gates
Yeah. Usually you will see Jesus seated on the right hand of the Father. Right? Usually, yes. But right now, Stephen sees Jesus what? Standing. Why it could be? Why it could be? Why Jesus was standing? Anyone?
To receive Stephen. Receive.
Yes, to receive Stephen, that's right. And it's like when a guest comes, Stephen is the first martyr. Jesus is welcoming the first martyr. And it's like when someone comes to the stage to get a trophy, people stand and clap the hands. Jesus is maybe, yeah, I don't read that Jesus is clapping his hands. I don't read in the Bible, but something like that, honoring the first martyr. Jesus standing for Stephen. Very rare you see Jesus standing. Yeah. Now the second verse, Philippians chapter 1, verse 23. Paul says, I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. So what is, he knows that what happens when he dies, he is going to happen immediately. You will be ushered into the presence of God immediately. Presence of Jesus. Worshipping Jesus face to face. Worshipping Jesus face to face. That is what this death is going to do. And Paul also says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, wow, to be absent from the body is to be at home with the Lord. At home with the Lord. So, what should we understand? We should understand right now, none of us will go to Sheol, Hades. No, we're not going there. If we die, if we are genuine Christian, we are going to heaven immediately. All of our dear ones ushered to heaven immediately when they died. That's what happens now. Because victory is won. Resurrection happened. Jesus won the victory. Now, yes, so everyone will be with Christ. Number 4, Sheol or Hades for the unbelievers remains unchanged. Still, Sheol is just as it is from the beginning for unbelievers. First, 2 Peter, we read, the Lord keeps the unrighteous under the punishment for the day of judgment. They are kept, this is like a remand custody for the judgment. Revelation chapter 20, the wicked dead remain in Hades until the great white throne judgment. Yeah. So that is what we read, right? Let's look at this. Revelation 20. Can we read Revelation? Revelation 20, 13 and 14.
And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire.
Yes, the death and Hades. These are all maybe some kind of metaphoric language. That means death, Hades is the place of the dead, especially the unbelievers. Death is thrown into lake of fire. That means there's no more death. Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. That means there's no more Hades. No more Hades. Because lake of fire is there that is far superior in punishment, far greater in punishment. That's the place where everybody goes. So that means until this lake of fire judgment, until white throne judgment, Hades will continue to be the same way. That is what we have to understand. All right. Any question on the intermediate state? Any question on the intermediate state?
Pastor, the word used for the souls in Sheol was they were bound and they were taken to.
Yes, bound. The idea is that kind of captivity or kind of still under. Idea is that they were not completely free. They were taking rest. Yes, they are in comfort, but they are waiting for the final redemption. So that maybe is the point of those words. Led the captives. They're freed, right? Hebrews, we read they're freed.
So they are still under captivity.
They are not still under captivity, no. Until the death of Jesus Christ.
Captivity for what?
No, that means, no, the idea is that word, what does that word mean? The word means that they're waiting for the final redemption. Final redemption. That means final redemption has not taken place.
Because when we use the word paradise, we are saying that's the place called paradise. Whether it is that part of the Sheol or Hades where they are there, it is paradise.
Yeah.
And the question of being captive in paradise does not arise.
Yes. So maybe, but
these two don't go together.
Yeah. So let's look at again how that those verses that I show you, look at this Hebrews chapter 9:15. Hebrews 9:15. Let's read one more time. Hebrews 9. Maybe we did not read from the Bible, so.
For this reason, Christ is the mediator of a new covenant, that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, now that he has died as a ransom to set them free from the sins committed under the first covenant.
Yes, look at that word, set them free. So the idea is that they were not completely free from their sins until Christ died. Not completely, absolutely, they were not completely free. It was kind of provisional freedom was there, but absolute freedom was not there, even though they were dead. So,
And still it is called paradise.
yes,
But
yes,
these two
because
things are
it is a place of
contrary to
comfort.
each other.
Yeah, it's a place of comfort and rest. Therefore, it is still called as paradise.
Even though they are under the sin.
Not complete freedom. They had only provisional forgiveness. That means a symbolic forgiveness that they are guaranteed. See, the outcome was guaranteed to them with the sacrifices, but the guarantee fulfilled only at the death of Jesus Christ. So that is the way it actually took place. That is, which is remember, that's the reason he said, the blood of the bulls and goats will not take away the sin. Why? The author of Hebrews said that.
Ephesians 4:6-4:8 also says the same thing.
Yeah.
He ascended on high,
let the captives.
the captives.
Yes.
They were captives.
Maybe the word maybe a little color in the color, maybe it is a little different, but the idea is still that they were not completely free from the sin, because the atonement for sin has not been, okay, let's take this way. The sin, the punishment for their sin have been not paid. Punishment for their sin have not been paid until Jesus' death.
Pastor, normally when we talk about Christ, we talk about Old Testament saints. We're looking forward to Christ's coming, and New Testament saints, after that, we are all looking backwards to that event.
True.
And that event is the one that faith in Christ is the one which sets us free. So,
yes, now
even though they were set free, they were still under captivity.
Well, wait a minute. Yes, their sacrifices provided only temporary adjustment.
Atonement.
Yeah, yes, temporary. The idea temporary means it is provided that so when they offered a sacrifice, they should believe on the coming sacrifice. If they believed, provided that they believe the coming Messiah, they were able to enjoy forgiveness, right? Experience, because they believe, yes, what is the forgiveness? Yes, we will have our payment for our sin will be paid. These are all the token, no token. These are all symbols of it. So yes, that is what they experienced. Absolutely, they did not experience final expiation. That was a horrible thing for Old Testament believers. That therefore God asked them to bring sacrifice every time, unlimited sacrifice for unlimited amount of sin. Every day, every time when they sin, they had to come with these sacrifices, because they never had the full remission of sin. Some kind, because the final sacrifice has not been done. So it was not easy to have a life in the Old Testament. It was very costly. Sin was very costly in the Old Testament believer, because there was no final expiation. They had to wait. So they were they were not completely freed from the penalty of their sin. They were kept in a safe place till that complete freedom comes, that only when Jesus paid the penalty. Yes. So it's right to use the word freedom or maybe captives. Yes, those are colorful languages used there for these Old Testament saints because they did not enjoy the complete freedom or for payment of their sin until, see, that is what the author of Hebrews says. They received approval for their faith, that is true, but they had to wait until the promise has come. And so that's what here we read, without having received the promise, they did not receive the promise. So that's how I see it.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you very much.
Sure. All right, let's go to the next topic. Not next topic. We are still. So I wanted to introduce. Second coming. All right. Simply, let's go the introduction of the second coming of Christ. So the subject is eschatology. So definitely we finished two topics mainly. One was death, and the other one was intermediate state. When we need to come to second coming here. When you go to the Old Testament, does Old Testament talk about second coming? Yes. Right? The principal divisions of the Bible for along the lines of the coming of Christ. Maybe you can say that the Bible explains this theme. For example, in the Old Testament, one of the main message was that Messiah is coming. And in the gospel, the message was that Christ or the Messiah has come. And rest of the New Testament, that is beginning from the book of Acts, is that Christ is coming again. So maybe that, Christ is coming, he has come, he's coming again, right? Maybe that is a way that you can explain us when you look at the topic of second coming of Christ or coming of Christ. Our Testament makes many clear prophecies about the coming of Christ. But this is where we have to be very careful. Our Testament never distinguishes between two comings. Oh, there are two comings. No. In the Old Testament, there was only one coming. Messiah will come and establish the kingdom. So, it's not he will come, die, resurrect, and then there is church, then he will come back again. That was not the Old Testament theme. Old Testament theme is that he will come, make the provisions for sin, atonement, and begin his kingdom. Maybe we can, if you say, we can take that way. Old Testament presents two apparently conflicting lines of prediction about the Messiah. Yes, if you study the Old Testament, you might see two conflicting lines. So some rabbis thought that there would be two Messiahs. Why? Because one Messiah is a lowly Messiah. In Isaiah 53, we have the suffering servant. Zechariah 13, smitten shepherd. Daniel 9:26, the Messiah that is cut off and destitute. So, in the Old Testament, there is a picture of lowly Messiah. But in the Old Testament, there is also a picture of the great Messiah. A mighty God, prince with a limitless kingdom, right? The prince who will rule forever. Daniel chapter 7, we read, yes, he's got dominion, glory, kingdom, that all people, nations, men of every language might serve under him, right? His dominions, everlasting. See? Kingdom is everlasting, eternal kingdom, right? Will not pass away. That kingdom will never be destroyed. So, yes, no 1,000 years, nothing like that in the Old Testament, simply an everlasting kingdom. So, yes, you see these contradictory statements in the Old Testament. So it's a kind of dilemma for the Old Testament people. One person like this, or could there be two persons? There were questions really addressed or asked here in this. Now, so some people thought that there would be two Messiah. So it was a kind of mystery. It's a difficult thing to solve it. Oh, here is a verse that we need to look at. First Peter chapter 1, verse 10, 11. The prophets who prophesied of the grace that would come to you made careful searches and inquiries. Yeah, prophets did what? Careful searches and inquiries, seeking to know what person or time of the Spirit of Christ within them was indicating as he predicted the suffering of Christ and glories to follow. Yes, the prophets were very curious how this is going to pan out, the suffering of the Messiah and the glories of the Messiah. How this is going to, they were really looking very intensively. And Daniel also wants to know about that really. The restoration of Israel. 70 weeks for the restoration of Israel. 70 weeks is prophesied. But then he talks about the Messiah that is cut off. He talks about the worthless shepherd. He talks about this Antichrist. Then he talks about the restoration of everything. So it was a problem. Now, the prophets were aware of the prophetic events. So what should we understand? The Old Testament prophets knew the events clearly. Like there is a suffering Messiah, a glorified Messiah, a lowly Messiah, a mighty, great Messiah. But when this will take place, how this is going to be completely, timing was an issue for the Old Testament, right? They knew the events, but they did not know the timing of the event. In retrospect, we can say that they were not informed that there would be a first advent that ended in rejection and a second advent that will end in glory. They did not know that. So they did not know the timing, but they knew the event in the Old Testament. So it was always a dilemma, kind of mystery, how this is going to pan out. But yes, the clarity has come in the New Testament. The clarity for the Old Testament of the lowly Messiah and the great Messiah. Now we know there are two comings. The same person is going to come, has come once as a lowly Messiah, and he's going to come like a great Messiah. So that's the way it has to be seen. All right, friends. That is the basic concept of the second coming. All right. Now what we will do, we need to look at second coming in the church, and we are going to dive into rapture and other materials. So tomorrow we are going to spend our time in rapture in a great detail. All right.